Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, always great to be here.
So you guys sent in some sources on this whole thing with NYC Mayor Eric Adams and his stance on undocumented immigrants
Mm.
and due process. And honestly,
That's a lot.
it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
We've got this pretty heated Reddit discussion
Right?
and a Gothamist article. So let's see what we can make sense of here.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is all happening like right on the heels of,
Sure.
Trump's reelection win.
Trump being back in office.
Exactly. And, his campaign and his history with,
His rhetoric.
with anti-immigrant rhetoric. Yeah.
Right.
So to see Adams kind of,
Yeah.
echoing some of that is
Echoing some of those sentiments is
interesting for sure.
interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
So like the statement that Adams made, claiming that the Constitution is only for Americans, American citizens, and that undocumented immigrants aren't entitled to due process. Like, what has the reaction been to that?
Well, I mean, there was immediate pushback, of course.
Right.
You have legal experts and immigrant advocates who are
Yeah.
saying that this is just not legally accurate.
Right.
Alora Mukherjee, who's the director of the Immigrant Rights Clinic at Columbia,
Yeah.
she basically said this claim has no basis in law.
Wow.
And she really emphasized that, the Constitution, especially when it comes to due process,
Yeah.
applies to every single person in the U.S., regardless of their citizenship.
It's not just the legal scholars, though.
Right. Well, right.
Murad Awada
Right.
from the New York Immigration Coalition, he basically accused Adams of like ripping a page out of Trump's playbook with all this, fear-mongering.
Yeah, stirring up fear
And spreading this misinformation about immigrants.
And I think that accusation kind of, gets at this question of like, what's going on in the Democratic Party?
Yeah.
You have Adams, who was, once seen as this like rising star, and now he's aligning himself with these policies that we really associate with like Trump and the Republican Party.
All the Republicans, yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely making people wonder like, what is motivating
What's going on here?
these moves?
Well, we do have to remember that Adams is facing those federal corruption charges, right?
Right.
To which he has pled not guilty. But then you have Trump kind of like
Publicly
expressing his sympathy for Adams.
Yeah.
And even hinting at a pardon down the line.
Exactly. It's like almost a little too cozy.
Suspicious.
Yeah. So, I mean, some people are speculating that,
Yeah.
that's what this is all about.
That Adams is trying to
He's trying to
get a pardon. Or maybe even like a position.
a cabinet position.
Yeah, in a future Trump administration.
Right.
But I think there are other things at play here, too.
What?
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
Like the political landscape in New York City. Right.
Is complicated.
Extremely complicated.
Adams has to appeal to voters who might be sympathetic to Trump's views on immigration,
Right.
while also trying to like hold on to the
Yeah.
support of his more liberal base,
Right, who are big on immigrant rights.
who are very much pro-immigrant rights. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just about,
It's not just about a potential pardon.
this possible pardon.
It's also about like navigating the political realities
Exactly.
of governing a city as diverse and as complex as New York.
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
to really understand the potential consequences of all this,
Yeah.
we have to understand these sanctuary city policies.
Right, because we've been using that term.
We've been saying it.
But can you unpack that a little?
Sure.
What does it actually mean
Yeah.
for New York City to be a sanctuary city?
So basically, a sanctuary city is a city that limits its cooperation with federal immigration enforcement.
Okay.
And New York City has a pretty long history with these policies, actually.
Oh, really? Yeah, going back to the late 70s.
Wow.
Under Mayor Ed Koch. And basically, the city has these rules in place that restrict how city officials can interact with federal immigration agents.
Okay, so what do those restrictions look like?
So, for example, city officials are generally not allowed to ask about somebody's immigration status
Okay.
when they're accessing city services, like hospitals or schools.
Right.
And they can only turn undocumented individuals over to federal authorities if they've been convicted of a serious crime. And even then, only with a judge's warrant.
Wow.
So these policies were put in place to like create trust
right.
between immigrant communities and the city government.
It's about making sure people feel safe.
Exactly.
To like access health care.
Yeah.
To access education. To just live their lives.
Right, without fear of deportation.
Yeah.
Exactly. And now Adams is saying he wants to scale these back,
Wow.
which of course has created a lot of fear.
Yeah, understandable. And uncertainty in these communities.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because, they're wondering if they're still going to be safe here,
Yeah.
if they'll still be able to, access services
Right.
without fear.
And this is all happening at a time when
Right, and this is all happening
New
when
York is experiencing this huge influx of migrants.
a huge influx of migrants, and the city's trying to figure out,
To figure out how to handle it.
how to provide for all these new arrivals.
Right. And tensions are high.
Tensions are definitely running high.
It's against this backdrop that, that Adams makes this statement.
Right.
Right. Where he's framing this whole, arrival of migrants as this crisis.
Yeah.
Saying that it's, straining city resources.
Yeah.
And it's preventing investments
Right.
in other areas.
And it's like, haven't immigrants always been a part of New York City?
It's part of the fabric of the city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
New York has always been this melting pot.
Right.
It's
a place where
people come
from all over the world
to make a new life.
To build new lives. Exactly. And I mean, despite what Adams is saying, the Gothamist article that we looked at points out that immigrants continue to contribute a lot to the city economically and culturally.
Right.
The former schools chancellor, David Banks, he actually credited migrant children with helping to boost enrollment in city schools that were struggling after the pandemic.
It seems like there's this
So it's like
disconnect between how Adams is portraying this and what's actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, you have the mayor saying, immigrants are this burden.
Yeah.
But then you have all this evidence that they're like a really vital part of the city's social and economic fabric.
Feels like a very delicate balancing act.
A very delicate
politically and socially.
Balancing act. Yeah, and then you add in this whole debate about due process.
And who is entitled to constitutional protections. And it just gets...
It gets even more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's like you have these two different stories kind of clash.
Two different narratives.
Right. You have Adams talking about how, it's this burden on resources.
Right.
But then you have this evidence that immigrants are contributing.
They're contributing so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's get back to this due process thing.
Yeah.
Because I think this is where it gets...
This is where it gets really complicated.
Really messy, yeah.
Yeah, so... due process is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment, right?
Right.
It basically guarantees fair treatment under the law.
Right.
It's like the cornerstone of our entire legal system.
Yeah, and that applies to everyone.
Everyone in the U.S., regardless of citizenship.
Right. But Adams is suggesting that undocumented immigrants...
Right. He's saying they're not entitled to that.
Yeah. What are the consequences of that? Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest consequences is that it could really erode trust between immigrant communities and the city government.
Makes sense.
I mean, when the mayor, who's supposed to represent everyone...
Right, all New Yorkers.
Exactly. When he makes statements that are singling out
right.
and potentially endangering a specific group of people, it creates this climate of fear and uncertainty.
And that fear has a real impact.
Oh, absolutely.
Like on people's lives, right?
I mean, it can make people hesitant to report crimes,
right.
to access health care.
Right. Or even just
or just to go about their daily lives without feeling like they're constantly being watched and judged.
Exactly. And we're seeing this all happen.
Right.
Against the backdrop of this national political climate.
Right.
That's become so hostile.
Extremely hostile toward immigrants.
Yeah. And Trump being back in office?
I mean, his reelection has definitely emboldened that sentiment.
Right. And there's
So seeing a lot more rhetoric.
Yeah. That really demonizes immigrants.
Yeah, demonizes and dehumanizes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you saw some of that.
Yeah, like in those Reddit comments.
In the Reddit threads, yeah.
People were worried that, if you deny due process to one group,
right,
it sets this dangerous precedent.
Yeah, what's to stop them from coming for other rights?
Exactly. And historically, we've seen...
I mean, history shows us...
how this can happen.
How quickly the erosion of rights for one group can affect everyone.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
A very slippery slope.
Yeah, so what can be done?
Well, legally, there is definitely potential for challenges.
Yep.
Several legal experts have already said that any attempt to deny due process to undocumented immigrants would violate the Constitution.
So this could end up in court.
It could absolutely end up in the courts.
Right.
And those legal battles could take years.
Right.
And in the meantime, the uncertainty and the fear in these communities is just going to continue to grow.
And it's real people's lives.
Right. It's not just some abstract legal principle.
Yeah, we're talking about families,
We're talking about real people
communities.
who are being directly impacted by these political decisions.
Right, and the Gothamist article
Yeah.
mentioned that, a lot of these undocumented immigrants,
They're already living in fear.
and Adams is just adding to that.
His rhetoric is just amplifying that anxiety.
Yeah. So we've talked about the legal stuff.
Right?
What about like the broader impact on New York City?
Right. How does this shape the city's identity?
Yeah. What does this mean for its future?
I mean, New York has always prided itself
Yeah.
on being this welcoming and diverse city.
Yeah.
A place where
A place where people from all walks of life
come together.
can come together and thrive. But
Yeah, but Adams's statements.
what Adams is saying and his desire to like roll back those sanctuary city policies,
Right.
it really undermines that image.
It feels like
It creates this tension.
there's this tension between like
Yeah.
what New York says it is.
Yeah, between the image it wants to project.
And what it's actually doing. And its actions.
Yeah.
And that tension can have real consequences.
Like what?
Well, I mean, businesses might think twice about investing
Okay.
in a city where a big chunk of the population is
Yeah.
living in fear.
Right?
Tourists might go somewhere else.
If they don't feel welcome.
If they don't feel welcome, if they don't feel safe.
So there's an economic impact too.
Yeah, there's an economic impact.
Wow.
But it's more than just dollars and cents.
Right.
There's a cultural and social cost
Yeah.
when a city loses its reputation
Right.
as a place that's inclusive
Yeah.
and offers opportunity.
Yeah, it loses something bigger.
It loses a part of its soul.
That's a really good way to put it.
And that's why this whole conversation
Yeah.
about due process and immigrant rights
Yeah.
is so important.
It's about our values.
It's about the kind of city we want New York to be,
Yeah.
the kind of society we want to live in.
Right. Do we want to be welcoming?
Do you want to be a place that embraces diversity?
Or do we turn our backs?
Or do we turn our backs on the people who need us most?
It feels like a big choice.
It's a crossroads.
Yeah, and the decisions we make now
The decisions we make today
are going to have consequences.
will have consequences for years to come.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it really does feel like a turning point for the city.
It does.
But I think before we get like too,
Yeah.
caught up in that, let's kind of
zoom out a little.
zoom out and think about what this says
Right.
about the bigger picture.
What does this tell us about the political landscape?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how this whole controversy with Adams has become like a mini version
Yeah.
of the political tensions in the whole country.
Right. You see that same divide.
You see the same clash between people who think immigrants are a threat
Right.
and people who see them as, a vital part of society.
Yeah. And it's not just New York.
And this is happening everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like social media
Oh, yeah.
has just like
Amplified.
made it all worse.
Made it so much worse.
Yeah. Everyone's in their own little echo chambers.
Everyone's just hearing what they already believe.
Right.
Yeah, and social media can be great for connecting people
Sure.
and sharing information, but it can also be really dangerous.
Right.
Because it's so easy to spread misinformation.
And especially with something like immigration.
Especially with these complex issues,
Yeah.
it's so important to think critically
Do your research
about the information you see and to try to look at it
from different angles.
from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what we try to do here.
Yeah, like with this deep dive.
It's about cutting through the noise
Yeah. Get to the heart of the matter.
and figuring out what's really going on.
So for someone listening who's been following this whole Adams thing,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want them to take away from this?
I want them to know that they can do something.
Okay, so what can they do?
I mean, first of all, stay informed. Read articles from good sources.
Okay.
Listen to podcasts like this.
Great plug.
And, talk to people
Yeah, have conversations.
who have different opinions.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's about educating yourself.
Right.
And challenging your own biases.
So once you're informed, then what?
Then you can take action.
Okay.
Support organizations that are working to protect immigrant rights,
Right.
like the New York Immigration Coalition, the
Yeah.
Immigrant Rights Clinic. Donate your time.
Yeah.
Donate your money, volunteer.
Or even just like spread the word.
Yeah, tell people about the work they're doing.
Yeah.
And then there's political action, too.
Right. Contact your representatives.
Yeah, let them know you care about this.
Write letters. Make phone calls.
Go to town halls.
Yeah.
Make your voice heard.
Hold them accountable.
Exactly.
And with social media,
Social media can be really good
you can get the word out.
for getting people to mobilize,
Yeah.
even just sharing an article or starting a conversation.
Yeah.
can make a difference.
Every little bit helps.
It all adds up.
Yeah, and it's not just about politics.
Right. It's about doing the right thing.
Right.
It's about treating everyone with dignity and respect,
Yeah.
no matter their immigration status.
Recognizing our shared humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how we build a better world.
Well said.
Yeah,
So I think that about wraps up
I think so.
our deep dive on this
Yeah,
this controversy.
this whole situation.
Yeah, it's been a
It's
really
been a lot.
intense conversation.
There's a lot to think about.
But I think a really important one.
It's very important.
And I hope that, everyone listening
Yeah,
feels like they understand it.
a little bit better.
Yeah, a little bit better now.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more,
Yeah, we've got some resources in the show notes.
always check out the show notes.
So until next time,
Stay curious, stay informed.
and keep diving deep